There's a white powder you can buy right now for under $15 that kills roaches, bedbugs, fleas, ants, and ticks, and keeps killing them for years from a single application. Not months, years. The pest control industry brings in over $27 billion annually in this country alone, and this powder threatens every dollar of it, which is probably why most people reach middle age without ever once hearing its name. Think about the last time you dealt with bugs. Maybe it was roaches showing up in the kitchen. Maybe fleas hitchhiked in on your dog and turned your carpet into a nightmare. Maybe you woke up with bites and spent $3,000 on an exterminator who came back 4 times and still didn't fully solve it. That is the standard experience now. You call someone, they spray something, it works for a few weeks, the bugs come back, you call again, the quarterly visit, the annual contract, the endless cycle of temporary relief that never quite becomes a permanent solution. And every time you sign that renewal, somewhere in a corporate office, someone is very pleased with you. Here is what that industry doesn't advertise. The bugs are winning. Not just in your house, everywhere. Bedbugs across American cities have developed such strong resistance to the synthetic chemicals used against them that a 2016 study in the Journal of Medical Entomology found those chemicals functionally ineffective against more than 80% of sampled populations. German cockroaches have shown resistance to multiple classes of insecticides simultaneously. The chemicals keep getting weaker, the service contracts keep getting renewed, and nobody stops to ask whether the whole approach is fundamentally flawed. The powder is called food-grade diatomaceous earth. And before you move on thinking this is some fringe wellness product, stay with me, because the science behind it is genuinely fascinating. The history behind it is centuries deep. And the reason you've probably never heard of it is a straightforward story about how money shapes information. Long before humans existed, vast inland seas covered much of what is now the American West. In those waters lived microscopic, single-celled organisms called diatoms, so small that 1,000 of them lined up would barely cross your thumbnail. Each one constructed a shell for itself out of silicon dioxide, the same compound as glass. When they died, those shells accumulated on the seafloor over millions of years, layer by layer, eventually compressing into chalk-white deposits hundreds of feet thick. Today, those deposits are mined, dried, and milled into a fine powder. That powder is diatomaceous earth. It looks harmless. It feels like talcum powder. And to any crawling insect, it is catastrophic. Here is why, and this part matters. Because understanding the mechanism is what makes you take it seriously. Every insect, every single one, is sealed against the world by a thin, waxy layer on its exoskeleton. That wax is its lifeline. Insects don't regulate moisture through skin the way we do. They depend entirely on that wax coat to hold their body fluids in. Under a microscope, diatomaceous earth particles look like shattered glass, because that is essentially what they are. Millions of razor-edged fragments with tiny pores covering their surface. When a bug walks through even a thin dusting, those edges score through the wax layer, and the porous structure of the particles begins pulling oils and moisture right out of the body. The bug desiccates. It dries from the inside out. And here's the part that no synthetic chemical can claim. A bug cannot evolve resistance to this. Resistance to chemicals works because a few individuals carry genetic mutations that let them neutralize the poison. Those individuals breed, and within a few generations, you have a resistant population. But there is no gene that prevents an insect from losing moisture through a scratched exoskeleton. You cannot evolve your way around physics. This powder has been used since the mid-1800s without a single documented case of resistance developing in any species. That is not a marketing claim. That is just the record. So how did something this effective, this cheap, and this durable stay off the radar for most people? The answer isn't dramatic. It's just economics. Pest control as an industry is structured around recurring revenue. A technician visits quarterly, applies a treatment that degrades within weeks, and the cycle repeats. Diatomaceous earth applied correctly in a dry indoor environment doesn't degrade. It doesn't evaporate. Soil microbes don't break it down. A layer settled into a wall void or beneath a refrigerator will keep killing insects for years without any reapplication. There are grain storage facilities that treated their silos with this powder in the 1970s and documented active efficacy decades later. That kind of permanence is the enemy of a subscription model. No publicly traded pest control company has a financial incentive to recommend a one-time $15 solution when a $400 annual contract is available. There's a regulatory layer to this as well. When the EPA developed its modern pesticide framework, diatomaceous earth was classified as a minimum risk pesticide under Section 25B, meaning it's exempt from the heavy registration process required for synthetic chemicals. That sounds like a win. In practice, it meant that no company could patent it, brand it exclusively, or recoup the marketing investment needed to put it in front of millions of consumers. So while every household in America knows the names of half a dozen spray products from television commercials, most have never encountered the word diatomaceous. The powder existed in a kind of commercial blind spot. known to traditional farming communities, organic grain producers, and a handful of integrated pest management researchers, but never pushed into mainstream awareness because nobody stood to profit from doing so. The real-world track record is substantial. Traditional rural farming households across the Midwest and Mid-Atlantic have used it continuously for pest control in barns, chicken coops, and grain storage for well over a century. Not out of stubbornness, but because it worked reliably where synthetic products eventually failed. Extension researchers who documented its use in dairy operations found fly population reductions exceeding 90% within 10 days of application, at a fraction of the cost of commercial treatments. A 2013 study published in the journal Insects, conducted by researchers at Purdue and Rutgers, tested food-grade diatomaceous earth head-to-head against deltamethrin, one of the most commonly used professional bedbug treatments. The diatomaceous earth reached 100% mortality in 10 days. The deltamethrin reached 44%. Limited by resistance in the test population. The cheap, unpatentable 200-year-old powder outperformed the modern professional chemical by more than 2 to 1. The USDA approves it for certified organic grain storage. The FDA lists it as generally recognized as safe, the same category as table salt. Applying it correctly comes down to 3 things that almost every first-time user gets wrong. The first is quantity. Your instinct is to use more. More is wrong. A thick pile of dust is visible to insects, and they'll route around it. What you want is a film so thin it's barely visible when you tilt a light across it. The bug doesn't register it as an obstacle and walks straight through. A single pound of powder applied this way can treat an entire average home. The second is moisture. Wet, diatomaceous earth is inert. The glass edges can't scratch through a water-coated surface, and the pores can't absorb oils when they're already saturated. Apply it only in dry locations, and reapply after anything that wets it. Indoors, this is rarely an issue. Outdoors, you'll need to reapply after rain. The third is patience. This is not a contact killer in the way a spray is. A bug walks through the dust, the damage begins, and death follows in 1 to 3 days, sometimes longer for larger insects. People who expect a pile of corpses by morning get discouraged. The infestation doesn't announce its collapse. The bugs simply quietly stop appearing. For practical application, use a small squeeze bottle or a hand bellows duster to lay the film along baseboards, into electrical outlets, beneath and behind appliances, into wall voids, along the tops of kitchen cabinets where roaches leave scent trails, into carpet and pet bedding for fleas, and into the cracks of flooring. For bed bugs, focus on the seams of the bed frame, the box spring, the gap between the floor and baseboard, and any outlet near the bed. Treat everywhere the insect travels, not just where you see them. Now here at Hidden Fix Lab, we are always going to give you the honest version, not just the exciting version. This powder has real limitations. Above about 75% relative humidity, it begins absorbing ambient moisture and loses effectiveness, so it is less suited to crawl spaces and bathrooms unless those areas are dehumidified. It is not a fast knockdown solution. If you have a severe infestation and need results in 24 hours, this is not that. It is also purely a contact killer. It has no repellent effect and no residual toxicity, so if a bug bypasses the treated area, it survives. Coverage matters. And critically, you must buy food-grade diatomaceous earth, not pool-grade, not industrial filter grade. Pool-grade has been heat-treated and contains up to 60% crystalline silica, which can genuinely damage lung tissue with repeated exposure. Food-grade contains less than 1% crystalline silica and is safe enough that the FDA approves it as an anti-caking agent in livestock feed. The bags are clearly labeled. Food-grade goes in your home, pool-grade does not. Wear a simple dust mask during application to avoid breathing any cloud of fine particles, and let it settle for an hour before allowing pets into the treated area. There's something worth sitting with at the end of all this. We live in a time when the standard response to almost any household problem is to buy a product, use it, watch it fade, and buy another. The pest control industry didn't create that habit. They just perfected profiting from it. Diatomaceous earth disrupts that loop entirely. It is not a recurring purchase. It doesn't generate a service contract. It doesn't require a technician. It costs $15 and works for years. The reason you probably didn't know about it until now is not because it was hidden in any dramatic sense. It's because knowledge that doesn't make anyone money tends not to travel very far. Traditional farming communities kept it alive, not because they were told to, but because they paid attention to what actually worked and passed it down without anyone's permission. That kind of knowledge belongs to everyone. It always did.